We begin with the New York Jets this morning, who chose a tremendous day for Joe Douglas, their general manager, to speak to the media for the first time since this season started. Now, in fairness to the Jets, this is when the GM normally speaks. They speak after the trade deadline, at the midway point of the season. Joe Douglas' Jets team is 0-8, and we start by hearing from Joe Douglas himself. Joe Douglas was asked about Adam Gase and whether or not he still believes in Gase. It's a little long, but here's the full question and answer from Rich Simidia of ESPN grilling Joe Douglas on Gase.
In your opinion, can this team get to where you want it to be with Adam as the head coach?
Yes. Ultimately, like I said, I have to do a better job for all these coaches and players. And the hope is that we can fix these problems together and be here together for a while.
So you're saying he's part of the solution then?
Yes.
Okay. So let me say this. It should be kept in mind that Joe Douglas is basically in an impossible position at the midway point of the season being asked questions about Adam Gase through the media. He's not going to come out and rip the head coach of the team. Because the reality is, if you know anything about the Jets' structure, is that the coach and the general manager are essentially on equal footing inside the organization. Both report directly to Christopher Johnson, the team's owner. Gase does not work for Douglas, and Douglas ultimately does not have the say in whether or not to fire Gase at this point. That could change at the end of the season when you would hope, if the Jets are 0-16 or 1-15, I don't see a win, but let's say 0-16 for the sake of this conversation, they're the worst team in the NFL. You would think Christopher Johnson would go to Joe Douglas and say, you can make the change at coach and be instrumental in hiring our next coach. That's how a competent organization would run things. The issue for the Jets, of course, is they are not a competent organization. But once again, Gase does not work for Douglas, and Douglas is not the one that can make that decision 8 games into the season. And I would argue this. If the Jets were not going to fire Gase when the season was still, in theory, still alive at the beginning, it doesn't make any sense to fire Gase right now. In fact, after the Jets lose on Monday Night Football to New England and they fall to 0-9 entering the bye week, I long said on this show, I think that would be the time to fire Gase. But at this point, I don't want Gase gone at all this season. Adam Gase is the Jets' best chance at finishing 0-16. You look at what the Jaguars have at quarterback now. Lufton, some kid from Oregon State making his debut with Gardner Minshew injured. Jacksonville, if they finish tied with the Jets record-wise, would get the first pick. And as a Jet fan, all I care about at this point is getting the first overall pick. And the only way to do that might be to go 0-16 because I don't know if Jacksonville's going to win another game either. Thank God they beat the Colts week 1. So the Jets' best chance, realistically, at getting the first pick might be to actually retain Adam Gase as their head coach, as sad as that is. And you might be saying, Jake, it doesn't matter if they make Greg Williams the interim. They might win a game. They're still not going to win a game. If they make Greg Williams the interim, I'd be worried they'd win a game. I really would. He's got interim head coaching experience. He did it in Cleveland, and they won a bunch of games. And I just don't think you want to take the chance. You have the ultimate tanking weapon right now with Adam Gase. I've talked about this before. At this point, it doesn't make any sense to change the coach. Now, as far as the comment from Douglas about Gase being part of the solution, what's he going to say? No, we're just keeping him around just to get the first pick. How would that go over in New York? So I love when fans freak out over press conferences when the reality is nothing that is said at these things usually is newsworthy. Now, I'll say this for Douglas. He did admit he made a mistake with Robbie Anderson. He did admit he made a mistake not evaluating the free agent market at receiver properly because they should have kept Robbie Anderson. That was obvious. He had very good chemistry with Sam Darnold. He was an ascending player. And the Jets let him go for what essentially amounted to be just a one-year commitment that Carolina gave him. It was a mistake not to bring him back, and at least he owned it. I mean, how many GMs would actually be upfront and tell you they messed that up? So I did like to hear that from Douglas. At least someone in that organization showed some accountability, unlike Adam Gase, who blames everyone but himself. But the reality is the best case for the Jets at this point is to keep Gase for the remainder of the season and get the first pick, as sad as that is. This team is going absolutely nowhere. So at this point, keep the coach, guarantee the 1-15, more likely 0-16 season, and be sitting there with the first overall pick. Now we get to what Joe Douglas had to say about Sam Darnold. Because Joe Douglas was asked if Sam Darnold is still this team's franchise quarterback moving forward.
Yeah, my thoughts on Sam are the same now as they were then. If Sam's an ultra-talented quarterback, and I really can't say enough about his grit and his toughness. Ultimately, I've got to do a better job of putting talent around Sam, and we have to develop some kind of continuity within the offense moving forward. The silver lining is that there's 8 games left, and we have guys coming back healthy. And so hopefully we can do that over the last 8 weeks of the season.
No team is going to operate at the midway point of the season as if it's a foregone conclusion they're going 0-16 or they're going to have, the first overall pick. So Joe Douglas can't come out and say, yeah, we like Sam, but if Trevor Lawrence is there, oh, baby, we're taking him. He's not going to say that. Plus, Joe Douglas can't think that the Jets are going to be sitting there with the first pick at this point. That's not how he's viewing the team. So anything he says on November 3rd about the coach and the quarterback, take it with a grain of salt. I do genuinely believe that Douglas likes Sam Darnold. I do genuinely believe that he thinks Sam Darnold with the right players around him could be a really good quarterback. But I also think if the Jets are sitting there with the first overall pick, they're still going to take Trevor Lawrence and trade Sam Darnold because Douglas will justify it by saying, as much as we love Sam, Trevor Lawrence is generational. He's that good. And we're not going to be, dumb enough to not take him. So the writing's still on the wall that if the Jets are sitting there with the first overall pick, Sam Darnold's playing for a different team next year. He'll be in Pittsburgh, Indy, San Fran. He won't be with the Jets. But I take Douglas at his word when he says he likes Sam and thinks that he could be a franchise quarterback. I still believe that, despite the fact the team stinks. I know what bad quarterback play is like. I've seen a lot of it in my lifetime as a fan of this godforsaken organization. I think Sam Darnold is a big part of the solution if they had competence around him. They don't. They have the worst coach in the league, and they have the worst roster in the league. And a quarterback who's 23 years old in his third season can only do so much. But just remember this. When Cliff Kingsbury got the Cardinals job, and they were sitting there with the first overall pick, a year after they used a top 10 pick on Josh Rosen, Cliff Kingsbury initially said that Josh is our quarterback. That was his exact quote. How'd that work out? So just remember, nothing that Joe Douglas says on November 3rd means anything if the Jets are sitting there with the first overall pick. And I like Sam Darnold, and I think he can be a very good quarterback. I will continue to say it. But if the Jets are sitting there with the first overall pick, they're taking Trevor Lawrence, and that's the only move to make. New coach, new quarterback, flip Sam for a late one or a second, and start building this team. The other thing I did really like hearing from Douglas is the emphasis on getting the draft right. I mean, it's about time a Jets GM comes in and says it's enough of trying to build through free agency and just hit on your draft picks. You will not win in the NFL if you don't draft right. And the Jets are in this spot because go look at their drafts the last decade since they last made the playoffs. Most of the guys they've taken were either busts, successful on different teams besides the Jets, or just flat out stunk and are out of the league. That's why the Jets are in this spot. Douglas talked about the 9 picks they have in the first 3 rounds over the next couple of years. They got to hit on these picks. That's the only way you turn things around in the NFL. You can't build a team through free agency. It doesn't work. 2 years ago, the Jets had the most cap space in the league. How'd that work out? They're even worse now than they were. So, overall, anything Douglas says about Gase, anything he says about Sam Darnold, read through the tea leaves a little bit, will you? What's he going to say? Ultimately, if Adam Gase is coaching the Jets next year, though, I'll just say this right now, I'm not watching. I'm done. And I think the organization knows that as well. The Jet fan will not tolerate Adam Gase coaching this team if they're sitting there with the first overall pick. Then if you're Trevor Lawrence and he says he's not playing for you, I wouldn't blame him. At that point, I'd say, you know what, Trevor? Good for you. That's why I think Gase will be gone.